On this episode of Creepy Encounters, we'll be talking about 6 true scary stories that take place on Halloween night. Story number 1. The Man Who Killed Halloween. One of the most chilling and widely known true stories about Halloween involves a father named Ronald O'Brien, also dubbed the Candyman, or the Man Who Killed Halloween. On Halloween night in 1974, O'Brien took his 2 children and a group of friends trick-or-treating in Pasadena, Texas. At one house, they knocked on the door but got no answer, so they moved on. Moments later, O'Brien reappeared holding 5 pixie sticks. He claimed that the homeowner had given them to him after all. Later that night, O'Brien's 8-year-old son Timothy was excited to have a pixie stick. Unbeknownst to Timothy, his father had laced the candy with cyanide. Within moments of eating it, Timothy began vomiting violently and convulsing. Despite the efforts of paramedics, Timothy died on the way to the hospital. Ronald O'Brien claimed the candy had been tainted by a stranger, sparking a widespread panic about poisoned Halloween candy. However, investigators soon learned that O'Brien had taken out a hefty life insurance policy on his children just days before Halloween and had laced the candy himself to collect the payout. He was later convicted of murder and executed in 1984. This terrifying case created a lasting urban legend about poisoned Halloween candy and remains one of the darkest moments in the history of Halloween trick-or-treating. Story number 2. The Trick-or-Treater Who Never Left. In 1982, in Deer Park, Texas, a family had a Halloween night they would never forget. A couple named Janice and John learned about a chilling break-in that occurred while children were out trick-or-treating. That night, they had been handing out candy to kids all evening. Toward the end of the night, after the doorbell stopped ringing, Janice noticed a figure still standing at the front door. Assuming it was just a late trick-or-treater, John opened the door. Instead of a child, a masked adult man stood there in complete silence, holding out a bag. The man wore an eerie clown costume, his face obscured by a creepy lifelike mask. Thinking it was a prank, John laughed nervously and offered him some candy, but the man said nothing. Feeling uneasy, John told the man they were done for the night and closed the door. As John turned around, he saw the man had slipped inside the house. In a moment of panic, John yelled at the stranger to leave, but the man continued to stand there in silence, holding the bag. When Janice called the police, the man simply turned around and walked out without saying a word. By the time the police arrived, the masked figure had disappeared into the night, leaving no trace behind. The couple was left shaken, haunted by the memory of the masked stranger who had entered their home without saying a word. Story number 3. The Missing Girl Who Knocked on the Wrong Door. In the early 1990s, a young girl named Lisa went missing while trick-or-treating with friends in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Idaho. She was 10 years old. Her parents were growing increasingly concerned when Lisa hadn't returned home by her curfew. After a frantic search around the neighborhood, her friends told her parents that Lisa had wandered off alone to visit a house that was set back from the road and covered in thick trees. The police were called, and an investigation began immediately. They canvassed the area, asking neighbors if they had seen Lisa. One house, the same one her friends had mentioned that she had gone to, seemed strange to investigators. It was an old, dilapidated structure at the end of the street, barely visible from the road. The elderly man who lived there was known for being reclusive and had a reputation for being off. When questioned, the man denied seeing Lisa or any trick-or-treaters that night, but the officers were suspicious. A few days later, Lisa's body was discovered in a nearby ravine. Her costume torn and her candy bag emptied. Though the authorities had suspicions about the elderly man, there wasn't enough evidence to link him to her death. The case remained unsolved for years, becoming a local ghost story that was told to warn children about wandering off alone on Halloween night. The tragic story of Lisa's disappearance became a chilling reminder of the real-life dangers lurking behind Halloween's playful mask. Though her case remains unsolved, many in the town believe she knocked on the wrong door that night, and the truth lies within the walls of that eerie house at the end of the street. Story 4. The Haunted House Murder. In 2011, a group of teenagers in South Carolina set out for a fun Halloween night. While trick-or-treating, they heard about a local haunted house attraction where they could visit for free. Intrigued, they followed the directions to what was described as a backyard haunted house, which turned out to be an actual residential home. The house was dimly lit, decorated with spooky props, and the teenagers were told by a man at the entrance to head into the backyard for the real scare. As they ventured toward the back of the house, one of the teenagers, 18-year-old Brandon Tyrell Allen, was fatally shot. It turned out the property owner had set up the haunted attraction to lure in unsuspecting victims, but the situation quickly escalated into violence. The shooter claimed it was a case of self-defense after an argument broke out, but the chaotic nature of the scene left police questioning his story. The house had been designed to look like a haunted maze, but for Brandon and his friends, the terrifying reality was far worse than any fabricated horror. Story 5. The Trick-or-Treater Who Never Spoke. In 1998, a woman named Melissa lived in a small town in Oregon and had been eagerly preparing for Halloween. Her house was fully decorated, and she stocked up on candy for the neighborhood kids. That night, as expected, the doorbell rang frequently, and Melissa handed out treats to costumed children. Later in the evening, as things slowed down, a single boy showed up at her door. He looked to be about 10 years old, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit, wearing a vintage, eerily plain mask with no mouth, just hollow eyes. His costume was simple but unsettling in its starkness. Melissa offered him candy, but the boy just stood there, holding his bag open in silence. After a few awkward moments, she placed candy in his bag, expecting him to say thank you or give some kind of response, but he just continued staring. She asked him if he was okay, but the boy remained silent. Finally feeling unnerved, she closed the door, but when she glanced through the window, the boy was still standing at the end of her driveway, staring up at her house. Hours passed, and the boy remained outside, motionless. When Melissa's husband came home and saw the boy standing there, he went outside to confront him, but the boy vanished into the night without a trace. The next day, after sharing the strange incident with her neighbors, they told Melissa that no children matching the description had come by their homes that night. The boy, it seemed, had never spoken to anyone. Melissa was left to wonder if the eerie, silent trick-or-treater was even real, or something far more sinister. Story 6. The Disappearance of Marjorie West. In the late 1930s, an unsettling Halloween night tragedy gripped a small town in Pennsylvania. The story revolves around a 4-year-old girl named Marjorie West, who disappeared without a trace while trick-or-treating with her family. On the evening of October 31st, the West family had gathered for a community celebration. Marjorie and her older sister were allowed to go around the block to collect candy, but when they returned, Marjorie was nowhere to be found. The family, initially thinking she may have wandered off to another house, began frantically searching the neighborhood. The townspeople joined in, combing the streets, alleys, and fields for any sign of the little girl, but Marjorie was never found. Search efforts extended for weeks, drawing attention from neighboring towns and local media. Over the years, numerous theories emerged. Some believed Marjorie was kidnapped by someone pretending to be a trick-or-treater. Others speculated she may have fallen victim to an unknown predator lurking in the area. Despite multiple reported sightings and rumors of Marjorie being taken to different parts of the country, the case went cold. Her story has since become a local legend, and to this day, some say that on Halloween night, you can hear her calling out for help. forever searching for her family. The eerie disappearance of Marjorie West remains one of Pennsylvania's most enduring unsolved mysteries, serving as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can hide behind the Halloween festivities. Thank you for listening. Be careful trick-or-treating, and happy Halloween.